And maybe reframing when we're going through weeks and weeks and weeks of saying like, well, this was just a stressful week for me. This is just a stressful week for me. I really want you to think about how many times you've said that. I really want you to think about how many weeks you've said, well, this is just a stressful week, or this is just a stressful day. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Rachel. Shut up already. Just shut up.
I made it through the intro without laughing, so I'm calling that a win.
Shut up. You are You're already off to a start here.
I know. It's how I live my best life. Listen, before we record, guys, there's something that
but we are recording some of this.
Before we start recording, there's something that always happens. Rachel, belches.
I hate when you call it that.
It's 100% a belch.
Okay, but that makes it sound grosser than it is. So stop.
What is it?
Stop trying to purposely make it sound gross.
Rachel, it's not just a burp.
It is. It's I'm trying to think of a better even word than burp.
A descriptor for what you do.
It's really loud. And I know that.
I would like to look up the definition of a belch because it would be a really loud.
Yeah, but you're making it sound like Homer Simpson. I had crushed a Duff beer before.
You could insert your belches into Homer Simpson's.
No one would know the difference.
No one would know the difference.
My lips even shake like the cartoon. No, because, well, first of all, I have to because you don't want it happening on here, right? So I get it out, and I concentrate all the burps that were going to happen during the podcast to one giant burp before the podcast, so that I can.
It's a talent. That actually sounds like a talent. Really, you just gather all.
Yeah, when you say it like that, I'm freaking like I have unlimitless power. I can control.
You just limitless would have covered that.
Listen, I have to let it out, and it has to be loud. I can't cover my mouth because then I'm not releasing the full power of all of them. Then I'll end up with more. So I have to let them all out. So there it is. We do this every podcast, every single podcast. I burp 5 seconds before we're going to start. And then you go, oh my God, do you have to do that?
I actually didn't react to you on this part, on this time. This time, I almost fell out of my chair because I'm in a corner.
Because my burp was so loud.
And then I went, oh my God, I almost fell. And you were like, I do it every time. And I was like, no one's even talking to you, psycho.
Well, everyone's talking about me, actually. So
I just want to say, guys, this is the thing that runs in the family. And good thing our mom does not listen to our podcast.
She really doesn't.
She is the queen of this. Her belches have been.
Stop calling it that. You're going to embarrass her.
Rachel, belch is only an embarrassing word to you, apparently.
Well, it's I don't like it. But it is true. That's where I get it. And when I did that, you said, have you ever looked around and seen other people's reactions to when mom has her giant burps? And you know what? I have. And you know what? It's fine.
No, here's the thing. We've become so numb to it that it'll happen at a table and it's just this my mom's just this little lady, right?
She's so small. And burps are so large.
So large.
They're earth shattering.
Yes. It's had 8 beers. I'm a grown man belch, and she's this little lady and she doesn't react to it.
She doesn't.
She just lets it ride, and then she's like, oh, excuse me.
She doesn't even acknowledge it. And everyone else is just
But the thing is, I remember having been so numb to it and then have brought a boyfriend there. And her doing it and him being
Is everyone okay? Are you okay?
Like
Do you need
table
someone?
is shaking, like, and then everyone else is just like going about their business, which makes it even weirder.
I mean, that's just one of the many initiations to our family. I feel like
The other one is
that's just
eating
level
chips.
one. There's like it's like an onion, the amount of initiation levels
It's
for
true.
mom.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
So,
for sure.
but level one is that she's absolutely just going to burp inappropriately loud at whatever time, and then just no one's even gonna just move on.
No one's gonna even acknowledge it.
I mean, are you saying that you brought a boyfriend to mom's house?
No,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
saying this has happened
I know
in
that
the
happened, but
past.
okay. We won't talk about it. We don't have to talk about it.
Rude.
I'm just saying, I mean, it's just exciting times. We don't have to talk about it though. I mean, I'm just excited, but we don't have to talk about it. It's
Oh
fine.
my God, I literally can't. Well, my stress levels are rising, so this would be a great time to bring up our topic for today is stress and what it does
I
to your brain.
So we were talking about this when we were eating lunch today, and it was me, you, and Mark in the conference room. And Kelsey goes, "Oh, do you guys get all those Calm app advertisements where there's like a rake going through the sand, and then like it rakes the sand and it like makes sort of a pattern, and it just kind of keeps doing that, and it's like she's like, I get mesmerized for like unlimited amounts of time of just watching those ads." And Mark goes,
I was like, "Have you seen this?" Mark was like, "I have."
he's like, I have, and I'll tell you what are you trying to do? What's that rake trying to accomplish? And is
He
it
goes,
ever going
"It
to
makes me
accomplish it?
so mad because it never gets to the end. There's never accomplished anything." And I was like, "Oh."
Well, that's sort of the point. You said like, well, it's not really
Calm.
supposed to accomplish anything. It's kind of, it's supposed to be kind of an infinite loop of
It's
just.
a break.
And he was like, I don't know where this rake is going or why it can't do the pattern it needs to do and move on. But
Yeah.
that does not calm him down at all. And it is a good indicator that what works for some people
Mhm.
does not work for other people. And it is also a good indicator that Mark is a psycho. If you don't like that rake, you are straight psycho. I'm
It's
sorry. That rake is the
true.
shit.
It's true.
I'll watch that rake all day.
The day we learned Mark's a serial killer.
I mean, I kind of always know, but this time
Along with the people who have the electric toothbrushes and don't actually brush their teeth, they just go from tooth to tooth, allowing it to electric like it's supposed to. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I thought you were going to say the people that have the electric toothbrushes and don't adhere to the exact amounts of time you're supposed to spend in each quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
What are you, just loosey-goosey? Listen,
Just
it's
going
on a
around.
timer.
Yeah.
And it buzzes when you're supposed to be done with that part of your mouth. I have seen Mark, he just it just, no, just, everywhere. And I'm like, no, you're supposed to be on lower left. What are you doing? What's happening?
Work its way back up. That all evens out in the end.
Oh my God, savage. You're a savage. Get your life together. What is it? What do you think it's there for? You're supposed to be on lower left. Get in line.
Oh, to each their own, I guess. But, when we brought up this conversation, I had been thinking a lot about stress, and I had been talking to different people who were in this continuous pattern of saying, well, I'm just stressed, or I'm just stressed this week, or I'm just stressed today, or this is what's going on with my body because of stress. And that just honestly being the default answer to anything that was going on in life was, well, because I'm extra stressed. And, I had asked my friend this at one point, that I said, like, you seem to say that as a response to everything that's going on. So what is your baseline for stress? Because if this week is extra and last week was extra and the week before that was extra, I'm wondering where we've hit our baseline.
It's a good question. It's a good question to ask. And You know, the world being what the world is, I think that the baseline has really changed.
Yeah.
And I think it's like a goalpost that they keep moving back and back, for, the just, I don't know. I mean, obviously this week is like beyond. And there are just seemingly so many things in the world, and we have so much exposure to be able to learn about all of those things and have them constantly kind of bombarding us. And what the human brain has the ability to comprehend and process, I think is being really tested by the amount of information that we constantly have access to. And also just the state of the world right now. I think the state of the world is really beyond challenging, and I think it's testing what what humans can withstand, honestly.
I think that's a great point and not one I intended to go into, but I think we would be remiss if we talked about stress and didn't talk about the fact that the human experience right now is operating at a level of stress that we were not intended to maintain. And what coincides so closely with talking about stress is the exposure to trauma and the continuous exposure to trauma and the amount of traumatic events that we are exposed to in this day and age is not our body has quite adapted and shouldn't to a certain extent to the amount of stress and trauma that we are exposed to and the rate that we are exposed to that trauma. And one of the things that I always like to relate this with, because it seems like when you said like the goalpost keeps moving, it seems like the stakes are always going up and up and up. And when we've done this when you talk about like taste buds, right? So like if you are exposed to Sour Patch Kids, for example, the watermelon flavor Sour Patch Kids, like over and over and over. Actually, eating watermelon doesn't taste as sweet, right? Because you become used to the extreme of that flavor. And the same thing kind of happens with our brain. So when we talk about stress and trauma, and we're exposed to such high level traumatic events, high stressful events all the time, you kind of get in this cycle where like that is now becoming your almost like norm. That's becoming what you're exposed to. And any level lower than that, where there's like quiet, where there is calm, where there is not exposure to that, almost seems very weird because that's not within what our exposure rate is.
I've heard numerous studies compare stress to drugs
Yes.
and the chemical responses in the brain that they have found extreme similarities between the chemical responses from an outside drug and the chemical responses that happen when you're stressed. And what one of the studies that I was reading had said that, like, just like a drug, stress is something that you can build up sort of an immunity to. So you will need more and more to get that response in your brain. And it's an interesting thing because stress actually, even though we always categorize it in a negative way, it actually has some effects on the brain that the brain likes and they're happy hormones. So I think that the first thing, when we started talking about this topic and we started talking about it in the frame of, are you addicted to stress? Has this become, because, like I said, like all those studies comparing it to drugs, like is it an addictive kind of drug for your brain? And we always are categorizing it in this negative way. But in fact, the anxious feelings that come up and that can be produced by like a stressful situation, there's going to be hormones released. Cortisol is one of them, and then dopamine is the other one. And dopamine is literally known as the happy hormone. Like, that is, you seek that out multiple times a day to give your hit, get your hit of happiness. And it's very difficult for your brain to tell what way you're going to get that from. And a lot of people are getting their dopamine from stress. And it is so, I don't want to frame stress always as a bad thing, because it can be, a good thing. And then that is kind of like leading into our next point of like why people might seek out stressful situations, because unknowingly they are getting hits of hormones that feel good to them. And then obviously they're repeating those behaviors to get those hits, because it can be, and that's how it becomes an addiction.
Well, I think something that's very interesting when I start to think about stress and, people's responses to stress and people's responses or our responses to an increasingly stressful environment is like, why would we then seek out stress in our individual lives to add on to that? And if you didn't get this from the point, what Rachel said is, it can actually be calming to us. So there are tons of stressful events that are going on in our worlds right now that are out of our control. So when we then seek out an increasingly busy life, or stressful events within our circles that we can kind of control, we're getting our dopamine fixes. So it's an interesting thing to talk about, because there are some stresses that we're like, these are not good stresses, right? Like, we can identify them and we say, like, this is a stressful event, this is a traumatic event, I'm responding to this in a really negative way. And then we think of daily stresses where, like, we are creating our own stress, and then we might be responding to that stress in a way of saying, like, well, I'm just so stressed, I'm just so busy, I have so many things when I've created this schedule. Ultimately, you've created the schedule that is now stressing you out, and the only person who has the ability to change it is you.
However, it is giving you something that you're seeking out that is making you happy. And it's a really important recognition, I think, just to like say that out loud. Like, I might be seeking out this stress on purpose because it might serve a purpose in my life. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about stress is that, when those hormones come out, like the cortisol, the adrenaline, the dopamine, like they all release. And what your central nervous system does is like, it turns off the non-essentials. So it's kind of like fight or flight, right? And then, so you're experiencing stress, you're in fight or flight, your body says, we're running from a tiger. So everything non-essential, just go ahead and go to sleep. We're just doing right now blood pressure and heart rate so that we can take on this task with a hyper focus. So basically, all of the concentration is going into like whatever you've decided the stressor is. And that's why people that say, when we talk to procrastinators, for example, and they're like, well, if I wait to the last minute, I work best under pressure. Yes, you do. That is 100% accurate, because you have created a fight or flight situation for yourself where the paper is due in 1 hour.
Yeah.
That is your version of a tiger. And so all of your focus, you literally shut off non-essentials, focus everything towards the paper, and end up getting an A because it's a hyper-focused paper with all of your best work in one like scenario. And it's like, did you create that? Yes. Was it serving you? Yes. But where we kind of get into that being negative, and it's important to make the distinction,
Yes.
right? Because stress is normal and it is needed.
Yeah.
But there is a level where it becomes an interruption in your life and it becomes a negative factor. It's going to impact your health.
Just like anything else. But honestly, overall, we give stress like a really negative connotation where, like, if someone says, like, well, this is a stressful event, you assume it's a negative event, right? But, athletes put themselves in stressful situations all the time. People put themselves in stressful situations all the time
On purpose.
on
I was going to
purpose.
use Olympic athletes as
Yeah.
an example.
Or even, athletes that are going into a local competition where, you're going in, you're stressing about it. Some people stress about an outfit that they're going to wear to a certain event that they chose. They really want to wear it, but it is a situation where it's causing them some stress. In some of these situations, like a local competition, you paid for that stress. Sometimes I have to remind myself of that. When I'm going into a workout and I'm feeling particularly stressed about it, I'm like, I want to be here.
I literally paid
I
money
literally paid money
for this stress. But like there's stress and there's excitement and there's nervous energy, and those are all, sometimes we bundle those all into one sort of negative package, but like actually as humans we seek out those things. They're part of the human
part of the human
experience,
experience.
and like we would feel less fulfilled without them.
Mm.
So like, there's that. And I also wanted to bring up, one of the reasons that I think some people might seek out stress. And I think it's important to sort of identify first who you are and what kind of a stressor you are. But there are situations in which people feel comfortable and better and more normal and more in control when there is chaos and stress. And that is probably due to circumstances of their upbringing where like chaos to them is normal and normal equals calm. So if you have, like think of like your factory settings, like if you were set back to your factory settings where you're like at your simplest form, some people's factory settings demands chaos and stress, and that is like their normal, and that's how they seek out feeling normal. And I definitely think that there is some stuff to unpack there, and I don't think you want to just leave that alone and say, well, that's just who I am. You might want to look into some strategies on that. But it is important to be able to at least identify the fact that you may be seeking out stress to feel more normal and calm.
Yes. So this is a topic that can be a really touchy one for a lot of people, but it's honestly a really important one. And if you don't know this about me, I've been a social worker many years before CVG, and for a lot of that time, I worked in a behavioral treatment residence. So what that was is working with behavioral girls ages 11 to 18. And a lot of those pathways, by the time you reach 15, 16, are already made. And one of the things that is a very when you're in that field, you understand this, is that a lot of people who have experienced some type of physical abuse or trauma associate physical trauma with love. And that's a really important thing to know about people, because when it becomes to behaviors that seek out physical intervention, they're looking for something calming and loving. Now those things in a normal, or I want to quote unquote normal atmosphere, seem really opposite, right? Like you seek out someone physically intervening with you to feel love and compassion. That seems opposite. But if you were taught that people who love you harm you, those two things go together. And it's really important to, as an individual, when you start to think about the relationships in your life, the type of situations that you seek out, and what makes you feel calm, what makes you feel normal, what makes you feel less stressed, and whether that's chaos or whether that's, different things in your life, being able to identify them, and in any hope to interrupt those pathways, you have to know what they are. And you have to start by introducing new pathways. So, for example, people who start to feel, really, when they're sitting for too long, they start to feel really anxious and chaotic. And what are they going to do? Are they going to, a lot of people like start drinking or look for disruptive behaviors. Like, what is your physical release that you might need to fulfill in that moment? And what is one that looks healthy for you? Some people start getting up and they clean the house, right? Like, I know a lot of people can relate to this because sometimes, you see someone who gets up and starts picking things up and cleaning things up, and they're like, "Oh, are they just want to clean?" And it's like, I think they're really stressed right
I
now.
was thinking of a specific instance. I remember that, like, when mom used to leave the house and leave us home alone for any reason, there would always be like a list of things that she wanted done, even if she was just like leaving for an hour, because she was mom and she wanted some damn help. And I was an absolute slob. And I was, it was like a regular mom thing. Hey, throw in, while I'm gone, can you throw in a load of laundry and load the dishwasher? And I, as a teenager, now that I'm thinking back on it, I was actually just overwhelmed and overcooked, and there was a lot of growing and things going, chemicals in my brain going on. But how I dealt with that was just to, like, lay around. That felt best to me because I always felt exhausted.
Mm.
And I don't know if that was like socially, like I was just putting so much effort into being a human that when I didn't have to human with other kids, I was just literally exhausted.
I
And
remember this.
you remember
I
how we
literally
used to
remember.
jump up
Yeah.
when we heard her pull in the driveway
Mm-hmm.
and act as if we were doing all
We've been
of the
working this
things?
whole time like Annie in the orphanage.
It was so crazy because I would just lay for as much time, and then, like, when it would be like, I would think there would be like 5 minutes left, I would just jump up, and this is really like weird. And I have seen my husband do that when I've come home
Yeah.
from being out somewhere, where he's been like relaxing on the couch and he like sees me pull in the driveway or sees me pull up and just like gets up and starts like sort of doing something. And
No one can catch me relaxing.
it's me.
Mm.
I'm the factor there because now there is no sitting. There's never any relaxing. There is never any doing anything pointless, like watching TV. That's a waste of time. Sitting there scrolling on your phone, that's a waste of time. It's always doing something. And now the people around me are like so uncomfortable not doing something in front of me because I'm like such a judgy bee about it. Do you think that's weird?
I don't think that's weird. I think that is common. I think that people who create this stress in their lives, so like we were talking about this before, where there's like different ways that like we exhibit how we are looking for that stress, and some people are very internal about it. So like, I have to be busy all the time, that means I am a better productive human, whatever. And then with the people that are immediately around you, you insert that upon them, right? So like, you have this level of resentment because you are so stressed on the stress that you've created in your own life, that if someone else is
That I'm really just
relaxing,
doing so I feel normal.
yes. But now, so you're creating that in yourself. And now if somebody else is relaxing, you're resentful that they can sit down. You can't even sit down. You can't even relax. But now another person who's supposed to be helping you, supposed to be your partner, how dare they relax and do nothing? I think this is a I don't think this is like, you are such a crazy bitch for this. Like, I think this is a very common thing with dynamics in relationships, with people who have not necessarily owned some of their self-imposed stress, or in times where you have not been able to keep it in check. So there are like healthy versions of you and unhealthy versions of you. And in my opinion, I don't know if I'm sure a lot of people disagree with this. In my opinion, you switch between those two, because like, I am sometimes a very healthy version of Kelsea, and there are times where I'm a very unhealthy version of Kelsea, where I'm like, these are the same exact qualities, and this is how I exhibit them when I'm feeling secure and healthy and secure in my relationships and secure in myself. And these are how I exhibit them when I am not feeling that way, when I'm feeling nervous, when I'm feeling insecure in my relationship, whatever. I exhibit them in this way, and they're the same. They're my same behaviors, right? Like, but they're displaying themselves very differently. So I feel like sometimes when you're noticing that, when you are walking in and you say something along the lines of, did you even do anything while I was gone? Are you even
He's had so
helping?
many years of that now that he doesn't even.
That's what I
You know what
mean.
has been like, we've done years and years of this exact pattern over and over and over. And honestly, the best thing for both of us has been for me to just admit that going around doing 1,000 things and never sitting down actually is making me happier than not. And it is fulfilling some kind of hit of whatever that I'm desiring. And it actually isn't a stressor. I've like tried to change my language on it and say, like, going around and doing all this yard work isn't something I have to do.
Mm.
It's something I want to do because it is somewhere in my brain ticking that happy check, and that is so much better for me. And it is better for Mark to lay on the couch and watch TikToks, and that is how he relaxes, and I relax with yard work. And both of those things are right, and they're okay, and they can coexist, and nobody needs to be mad at the other person for how they are doing it. But that took me a long time.
Yeah, and probably still a work in progress at
No,
times.
I'll probably
And
mess up
at
tomorrow.
times, right? Because like I was thinking about this too, where like there are times where I'm like, well, I'm just so stressed, and my thing is like, I'm never home. Like, I never go home. And like, maybe I should just like, other people, this is where we do the thing. Other people's lives are so much better because they are watching shows, binge watching shows. I never watch any shows. I never get enjoyment from shows, right? Like, and I get this whole like alternative life built up in my mind that it is somehow better, and I'm not doing it because I'm just doing too many things and I'm so stressed and blah blah blah. The reality of that is that like to binge watch a bunch of shows is not going to actually bring me joy. That's actually not that. I built that up in my mind like those people are relaxing. Like, I'm just never home and I'm running from place to place. I have chosen a active, very busy life where I'm going from place to place
On purpose.
on purpose. And actually, that helps me on a day-to-day basis. Like, that level of stress is really good, is good for me within balance. Times that you feel yourself getting out of balance is when you start to get those like physical markers, right? Where like you start to feel tired all the time. For me, I am a panic attack person. Like, I have panic attacks, and when they happen, I don't necessarily feel the uh like everything that comes before it. It's like, well, why did I have a panic attack? Like, came out of nowhere. And I'm like, did it though?
Did it though?
Did it though,
Was
Kelsey?
it that last spear, or was it the 9 shot?
Exactly. I'm like, well, I don't know why my heart's going to explode. I didn't do anything. Like, that's not true at all. But it's those physical markers where you start to say, like, okay, is this like anything else? Is this stress serving me right now? Is what I've created serving me right now? And if it's not, I may need to make incremental changes so that I put myself back in balance.
It's just like everything. It's just like everything. There are healthy levels, and there are just levels where you've let yourself get out of check. And that's going to be different for everyone. And just like, we mentioned before, like, your levels might be so off. I remember the story that you told about when you were working as a social worker with some of the women that you were working with when you were serving that population. And that you had two women at the same time, one who was about to become homeless with a small child and was on kind of the verge of a life disaster, and then one woman who was planning her wedding. And I remember you saying, like, it is so bizarre to me that the perceived stress levels of the woman planning her wedding are significantly higher than the woman facing homelessness. And it's really so much perspective, and then also so much of your background and what you've built up a tolerance to, what you're used to.
Yeah.
You know, if that woman who is facing homelessness had faced that a number of times in her childhood, more times than she
Mhm.
could count, then that doesn't seem right to her. And that's why, you know, this is really a giant self-discovery kind of thing, because it's really going to be a customized level of stress that's going to be healthy for you and serving the purposes that you need it to serve, without being disruptive or negative in your life. And it's a tough balance. And like you said, sometimes you need a panic attack
Mm.
to pull you back in the right direction. It's, you know, obviously you want to try to catch it before it gets to physical symptoms, but like when it gets to physical symptoms, that's when you definitely know that you have taken it too far, and it then, you know, can become an addictive behavior, and that's like a really dangerous path to go down.
No, I really like to tell that story about working with those two women because I was trying to, in the moment, be self reflective on that because my assumption going into both of those sessions was that one woman would be more stressed than the other. I was perceiving from my own individual perspective that homelessness with a child is going to be like, so I went into it like, okay, like, how are we doing? What are we, how are we going to figure this out? And she's like, it'll work out. And then going into the other one being like, how's the wedding going? And then her being like, I need you to prescribe something. I can't deal with this anymore. And I was like, this feels so opposite to me. But I think that's a really important point to when you speak to other people about your stressors is that everyone's going to enter in every conversation from their perspective, right? So they're always going to enter in with their own life experience, what they perceive to be stress. And, I had this conversation with one of my friends where she said, something along, she was trying to downplay the stress that she was really feeling because it seemed insignificant in the world in the climate that we are currently in. So she was, on the edge of tears with the level that she was feeling in herself and her body with what she was experiencing. But she was trying to add a layer of that to be like, it's really not, I can't even complain about this because look what's going on. And I was like, what's going on in your perception of, the rest of the world and how you perceive that to be more stressful has no effect on how you're feeling right now.
Those two things can coexist.
Those two things can coexist. You can be stressed about what's happening personally in your life and also have empathy for other people and their experience and their tragedy and things that are happening around you. You can also have empathy and sadness and know that those are stressful and trauma and all of those things, but you can also show yourself the same empathy and say like, this is very stressful to me, and my perceived level of stress for this is a 9, regardless of how that stacks up, because it doesn't stack up. We're not comparing.
There's no medals at the end. There's nobody ranking how much you suffered. These were huge realizations to me. And, you know, I've had, I will say, definitely a similar experience this week with the kinds of, you know, going back and forth between wanting to really enjoy and cherish my son and laugh with him, and then at the same time being like, I can't laugh right now because there's too many people that are experiencing the pain that an unimaginable amount of pain and I can't laugh right now. No one should laugh and no one should feel joy. And it's a really, it's one of those things where you have to step back and say like all the feelings can coexist in the world at the same time. There can be tremendous injustice and there can be tremendous joy,
Mm.
and there can be unbelievable tragedy and there can be triumph. Those two things can happen simultaneously, and it's really, really hard to, living in this kind of climate sometimes to even want to find joy or even want to get out of a stressful circle, because you almost feel like you deserve it, or that if you're not feeling those things, then you've lost touch with humanity, or you've lost touch with your empathy,
Mm.
or
Guilt.
yeah, or
Mm.
just feeling guilty about being
Feeling good.
happy,
Mm.
and it's that's something that is going to be a continued struggle, I know, for me and for a lot of people that are living in these kinds of times. I mean, it was a very similar experience in the midst of the pandemic, where there were hundreds of thousands of people just dying every day, and
Mm.
it was just one of those things where, like, could I laugh at my son's joke? How could I possibly do that with those kinds of circumstances? And, it's just a complex situation that I don't even know if the human brain is really that equipped to handle.
Mm.
But it is one of those things where if you, if you can cut yourself a little bit of slack and grace, and just recognize that, it's a complex situation and you're a complex being and there's a lot of things going on at once, and that's okay. I don't know, maybe you can start to feel better about it. It's been it's been a week that has really been testing how close to the edge you really already were.
Yeah, I think that's a great point for even all of us to think about and check in with yourself of where you're at, where your stress reliefs are, what are your stressful events, and even just taking, when we started the conversation about are you addicted to stress, and I was like, oh man.
Am I?
And I was like, the self-imposed, went down that rabbit hole. And then sometimes it just becomes this enough to pause allows you to frame where your good stressors are, where your problematic stressors are, and what you might be able to insert in your day that might bring you more balance with the things that you can control. So I know like some of the things that I identified as being my stressors, and some of them fall into a category of both good and bad. Same stressor, and they're just riding down the middle. Like sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. And I feel like a lot of times with people's jobs, they're like, I do like my job, but there are these things and they're stressful, and that feels like a negative stress, and that feels like a positive stress. Our workouts are very much, that's a stress we choose every day. And one of the things that I brought up to Rachel is that's not only a stress I choose every day, but when I seek out, because I know I'm getting my dopamine fix. I know that for me physically, that is a relief in my body from holding stress, from holding my breath, from holding on to the things that we're carrying around all the time. It like it lets it out for a minute, and then it allows me to refocus. And
But
some
it
of
is a stressor.
but it is a
You're
stressor.
purposely putting your body and your mind in a stressful situation where it is being forced to be uncomfortable and struggle. And that's on purpose.
Mhm.
And that's great.
Yeah. Because some of the stressors that we insert in our lives, we have to really know that like we are inserting them because we are in some control of them. We are inserting them, and those sometimes feel a little bit better for us. But there are certain situations that I wanted to talk about the um when we seek out drama, people who seek out drama. And just like being able to identify some of those things and, normalize that a little bit. If you're the person who's like, give me the tea, I need to have the tea. I go to girls' brunch so I can come back and be like, you wouldn't believe all of the things. I went to brunch last weekend and it was just me and one other person, and there was a group of girls next to us, who there's probably like 7 or 8 of them, and I was like mesmerized by their conversation more than I was my own, because like there was
Well,
just
they
like
had the tea, and they had
they had
mimosas too. So
they
I
had
mean,
mimosas and tea, and they were like a group of Portuguese girls. Like they were just
let's
like
get it.
throwing it down. And I was just like,
And they were definitely speaking loud enough for you to get all the
oh yeah,
details,
oh
because
yeah.
Portuguese girls speak at a volume that is off-putting to other people.
so so much
I live in New
so.
Bedford, so I could say that.
Oh, for sure. And I'm
I'm an
like,
Aruda.
you're honorary.
I'm honorary Portuguese.
But noticing those, and I want to say, with some of the reframing of some of that stress, of being able to identify some of that stress in our lives, and maybe reframing when we're going through weeks and weeks and weeks of saying like, well, this was just a stressful week for me, this is just a stressful week for me. I really want you to think about how many times you've said that. I really want you to think about how many weeks you've said, well, this is just a stressful week, or this is just a stressful day, and where the baseline is with that. And if that is something that you are enjoying, and you're just enjoying the drama of saying that it's
Dude, just
stressful,
admit that.
just admit it.
No, because it really does make a huge difference when you just admit that you like the drama, or
Mm,
you like to be busy, and you like the stress of like going from place to place and rushing, and like that. It's okay if you like that.
mm,
And Mark always does this with Rory, and I think it's like it's like our reframing of everything. We never say you have to do something, we say you get to. So like, we don't say you have to go to school tomorrow, so get to bed early. We say you get to go to school tomorrow,
mm.
so go to bed early. And when you do the same thing with, and that's just like a corny thing, and I don't even know if that's recommended by the experts, but that's just what we go with, because everything is kind of like we need to change the outlook into an opportunity. And when you reframe the like, I'm so stressed and it's horrible, when really that is really bringing you kind of like your dopamine hit, and you change it to like, I'm having a really busy week, I'm getting so much done, I'm freaking crushing it, and like, damn,
Mm.
like I'm just going.
Yeah.
And you say it in a way that is like, gives you the pride that you're really getting from it,
Mm.
and then it's like, not I have to work out, it's I get to work out. It's not like I have to run around from place to place, it's I get to run around from place to place.
I really love that, because the thing that I've found is that we are so accustomed to generalizing stress as such a negative point of conversation, is that we often ask people about their levels of stress, or assert our thoughts or feelings on their level of stress based on their lifestyle, right? So if you see a mom of I don't know why that made me upset. If you see a mom of a young child, and she's busy all the time, right? And you're like, you kind of insert this like, mom busy, like, do you even have any time for yourself? But, you know, in another perspective of being really lucky to be the mother of a young child, is like another way to look at that, and another way to think about that lifestyle that you have created is really lucky. And it doesn't mean on some days you're like, oh my god, like there's bottles and I wipe ass and like like there's like all of these a million like different things, but like that is a level of stress that is a really lucky one as well.
Well, I think that that's the ultimate, if that's the ultimate way to explain a stressor that is actually giving you those dopamine hits, is like
Mm.
a child.
Mhm.
Because like, moms ride this line every single day. they are like pulling their hair out, and then the kid goes to sleep and they just watch them sleep. Just look at pictures of them on the phone. Think of all
That's
the
what I was
things
gonna
that they
say.
are going to
I'm
do
like,
with them
you
tomorrow.
leave the room and then you just like look at the pictures of them.
No, and moms
These videos.
understand this more than anything. Like something that can drive you crazy can be the biggest joy in your life. And if you take that to like everything, some of the things that we're doing that we're categorizing as stressful are actually some of the greatest things in our life. And they're making us who we are. And, it's always good to reframe. It's always good to just sit back and recognize sometimes you don't even have to make any changes. Sometimes all you have to do is just sit back and recognize, like, wow, after I just ran around all day in what most people would consider a stressful day, like I feel really accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And just like sit with that and recognize it. Maybe it wasn't a great day. Maybe it wasn't a horrible day. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But just feeling that feeling and just saying like,
and normalize interrupting that pattern when people kind of put that on you in a conversation. You know what I mean? Like when, oh, you're a busy mom, you must be so stressed all the time. About being like, no, we have really busy lives, but we really enjoy that. It's really lucky that they get to go to soccer and volleyball and like blah, 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 all these things. And like, we, at the end of the day, it's like, wow, I brought them to all of these things and everyone still managed to like eat whatever it was at the moment and like get to bed somewhere on time. And I feel really accomplished by that. Like I don't know, I feel like we've created this culture where your expectation for having that conversation is that it is a negative stressor. And I would really like to insert this like idea where like we don't have to keep going down that rabbit hole.
not unless you don't want to.
Not unless you don't want to.
Not unless you're saying yes to things that you want to say no to. If you're saying yes to things that you want to say yes to, then keep on keeping on. And we support you and we love you. I hope that, this conversation is helpful and it opens up just some new pathways of thinking about it. And I also hope that, if you have identified that you have gotten out of balance with your stress and it has become a level of addiction that is unhealthy in your life and it's negatively affecting you, then you can really seek out the help that you need. And there is so many different outlets for people who respond to different things. There are so many different ways now in which we can address this. And if you are a person who just feels like the world is a little bit too much right now, just know that you are not alone. And we can absolutely find the things that are going to be effective to bring us back down to factory settings and get a little bit reset and get some perspective because it is tough out there. But if you find that it's beginning to be too much, just know you're just not alone. You're just not alone. We're with you.
We love you guys.